You want to start? You want to get going?
Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah. All right. I need coffee. Welcome. Hello, good morning, everybody. Back to Reanimated, 112th episode of this fair podcast. It's amazing. I don't know how we did it. 112. I'm Stuart Tiffin. I'm coming at you from California. And
Without
joining me,
coffee.
no coffee. Completely zero coffee, but some caffeine in other forms. Coming at all of us from New York is H.A. Conrad. What's up?
Like a tsunami.
Like a very directed tornado.
Yeah. Like a maelstrom.
The female strom, H.A. Conrad. So, hey, how's it going? Today we're going to be doing a little news roundup, and then we are going to dive into the last three episodes of Outcast Season 1, a show that is pretty awesome. So we're going to wrap that up, and then, well, hey, Fear the Walking Dead actually airs tonight in real life. By the time we get this on the internet, because we're terrible at that, it'll probably have been like a few weeks ago, but we'll do what
Hey,
we can.
I think we can be excused. We've had a lot going on. We've had a lot of work that has gotten in the way of recording, so hey.
Sadly, yes, our amateur status is only ever compounded by real life.
I know.
So yeah, that's gonna be our podcast today. So stick with us and let's kick it off with some more Floridian insanity.
I have to just say to you, like, first of all, this is a horrific tragedy for this couple. I don't even know like what to say about this. This is horrific, but I find
It's
it.
bad.
I mean, it's just weird. This is like, I mean, granted, the other one was several years ago, but basically, this guy who was their neighbor, just sort of
I don't think
left.
he's even their neighbor. I think he just randomly found their house.
Oh,
He
well,
was
that's
having
weird too.
dinner
With his parents
miles.
and just ran off.
Yeah, yeah, but go on.
I do find it odd that in some parts of the news they're describing him as like a stand-up guy and I think it's maybe to draw some contrast between what he did, like how out of character it was, but I find it really disturbing how they're characterizing him. But basically he went by this couple who were just hanging out in their garage and killed both of them and was eating the face of the husband in this couple. And I mean, it sounds like they think there's obviously some substance involved. And he also was stabbing them as well. Is that correct?
Well, that's how he killed them, and then he started eating them after he'd killed them.
Okay.
Or
So,
biting. It's really biting them is the verb that they've been using, not eating.
right.
So
But, Austin Haroof, did this. And then somebody tried to intervene and it was so bad. Like, they just couldn't get him off of them.
well, he got that person got stabbed also.
Yeah. So I feel really horrible for the victims in this case, Michelle Michon and John Stevens. Like, it just really awful. So whatever the heck did this to him, I hope they do something about it, because I don't know. I mean, they're saying like he was in some sort of excited delirium. But I mean, what's your thought on this?
Yeah, they still haven't. They've done one toxicology report and didn't come back positive for meth or heroin or any of the basic stuff. So they're doing like a higher level one, at least as of yesterday. I think that's the scoop. So what they're trying to look for now, and what all the media is jumping to, is he's on a
Flakka.
designer drug called Flakka or N-bomb, or there's a couple of other different options, or maybe bath salts. So these are just
Which
man-made. Well,
I
Flakka is a
which,
man-made drug out of China
right.
that simulates
Well,
cocaine, but it's like a quarter of the price.
and I think in the other case, which was in 2012, that they think was bath salts. But again, they didn't really, I mean, maybe it's tough to test it. I don't know. But either way, whatever the heck this is, if this actually causes this, let's not do that. Like, Jesus. Good
Yeah.
God.
I mean,
Those
he might
poor
just be like
people.
the one in a million, guy who does Flakka turns into a face biting stabber.
I don't know about you, but I still think those are odds I don't like.
Yeah.
So just say. But in any way, that's that
Well,
awful news.
just also in like the cops couldn't actually. They tried tasing him, and he didn't respond to taser.
Right.
So they actually got him off of his victims with a dog and several deputies. And the dude is breathing through a tube. Like he is apparently he's expected to like get released from hospital next week or something, but he's still unconscious and breathing with the help of a tube right now. Like, so he already got the shit kicked out of him once, which is good.
Anyway, blah. Do
Yes.
not like. Do not like. Um, so moving on off of that awful news. I think I'm ready to chat with you about the wrap up the last 3 episodes of Outcast
Okay.
season 1. Are you ready to do this?
We can do that. We should also point out. Wait, did we say yet that Fear the Walking Dead is tonight?
You did say this, but I,
Okay.
I can only sort of chalk this up to the fact that you have not had enough caffeine, and
Zero.
I applaud your I don't even know like what should
So
I
hard.
say? I have had coffee, so I have no excuse. Your Herculean efforts
Thank
to
you.
do this recording today.
I also got off a plane from Chicago last night, so I am, you
A
know,
little tired.
hitting the ground running, but actually flying. And this time I flew without my kid, so I was able to watch lots of Outcasts and take my notes. So I'm
Nice.
sorry to the guy sitting next to me who's probably disturbed by these 3 episodes.
Bill's disturbed just hearing the sounds from this show. So,
And my
you
main
know,
piece of feedback from all 3 of these episodes is, holy crap, it's dark. Like I had my monitor turned down because I didn't want to disturb people sitting around me.
it is very dark.
But but in doing so, there were a few scenes where I couldn't see anything going on at all.
Yeah.
And it's like almost exclusively at night.
Yep.
All of these scenes, like these 3 episodes, are almost all night scenes.
Yep.
Not
Um,
entirely, but yeah. So
so,
8, 9, and 10, we've got What Lurks Within, directed by Scott Winant and written by Tony Basgallop. Great name. We got then 9 is Close to Home. Howard Deutsch. He's also a producer on the show. I don't know if you noticed that.
yes, I did.
Okay, and Adam Targum wrote it. And then This Little Light is the season finale. Loni Paristare is the director, and Chris Black wrote it. And so let's crack into these. Some of these are a while back. Did you rewatch them to refresh?
I did, but I will say that my assessment after after watching all 3 of these was that, in fact, I thought that episode 9, Close to Home, should have been the finale,
Oh, yeah.
as opposed to episode 10. I think this is probably the one that impacted me the most and made me not really want to sleep. I don't know how you were feeling about it, but I just felt like, just in terms of the storytelling and the things that happen, like the arc of the characters, to me, this would have made a much more sense as like a cliffhanger ending, basically.
You're right.
And I feel almost like the season finale took away from it. So, I mean, and it is coming back, I believe. I think it's already been renewed for another
Yeah.
season,
Yeah.
which I'm happy about. But I just feel like episode 9 would have been a much more effective ending. And wow. So, before we get into the everything else. But let's get into Lurks Within, where we find out a little bit more about Brent Spiner's character.
We find out what this episode, if I have this is probably my least favorite of the 3. This episode
Agreed.
really like peels back the covers on demons and tries to like humanize them. And by the end of this episode, you're kind of like, I'm not even sure where I stand anymore as far as good guys and bad guys, and are demons even bad? Are they just misunderstood? So this is a bit of a tough one to watch.
Or are they also misdirecting?
Well, which they have been all season so far.
Right. I
But
mean,
this
so
episode gives you less fodder to think that.
it does and it doesn't. So it's Sidney, the character we're talking about, which is played by Brent Spiner. And there's a lot that comes out in this. So I'm going to let you chat for a bit, and then I will sort of talk about some of my thoughts about it.
Okay, so we find out initially in the beginning of the episode, Sydney is a carny. He's a carnival operator, like handing out toys to kids
And
who
clearly
have enough,
carnies are evil.
apparently. But what's really weird about his character is, yes, he's a carny, but then they cut to his house, and he's like this guy wearing a suit listening to jazz, and it's
Right.
never really clear. This is all a flashback. It becomes clear later. Some parts of it are, and some parts of it are not. So it's not clear when he is possessed and when he is pre-possessed. So it's a little tough to understand.
So is it a carnival or is it sort of a
County fair,
like a
something.
game center? That wasn't clear to me, but it felt
Yeah.
like to me it felt like he was working there and that was a cover so that he could have access to kids because the house and the jazz and all of that stuff seemed really nice for some dude that's working behind the counter at like a carnival slash game center.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's his cover, but it felt very jarring the way he presented himself as the carny guy versus what he seemed to be at home. And obviously, like he's a serial killer too. So or we assume he is, and all bad, all bad. Yeah, and he has a kid tied up in a padded room in his basement.
I think, I mean, he's a serial killer as well as a pedophile.
Yeah, all very chilling.
And he plays it very well and creepily.
Yeah, he's a tough guy to watch playing this character in a way because Brent Spiner for the most part, yeah, I don't know, he hasn't done a whole bunch of stuff that I've seen, just mostly Data and Independence Day, as far as I'm concerned. So characters who have mostly been very sympathetic, unless when Data's brother, what what's his brother's name? The bad Data.
Oh, bad data is I'll figure it out. Hang on.
Was it Data?
No. Although,
It was,
I'll admit to you when I saw Brent Spiner throughout the like I keep wanting him to confess, I have something to tell you, Kyle. I'm actually a droid. That would be kind of cool.
yeah.
Lore is his
Lore.
brother.
That's right. Anyway, so he has some experience playing creepy bad guys, but this is definitely the cream of the crop. So after that little weird introduction and kind of like curveball on his character, we know that this is going to be an episode where we learn a lot about him based on these flashbacks. We then see him get arrested by Chief Giles with Kyle watching. We see Anderson presiding over an empty church, and we don't know that it's a Sunday morning, but we can assume so by his
Hmm.
depressed face. We see Megan and Mark arguing about Johnny still and not doing great. Uh, yeah,
Right. And
and
then we also have a little bit more. We have more stuff with Kat Ogden, who is the fire chief's wife, and more interaction with the fire chief.
well, throughout this episode, yeah,
Right.
because you remember, I don't know if you recall last time we talked, I pointed out that the Reverend had had a couple of bad episodes. But
Mm-hmm.
this one just continues that trajectory of the Reverend. Like it's basically 3 episodes in a row of the Reverend making terrible decisions and also getting beat down by life and demons.
Right. And again, I mean, one of the things that I think is bothering me a lot about the character of the Reverend is that I just don't, his motivation is really weird. Like, does he want to be the hero, the superhero to rescue? Like, is he really that righteous? Because it doesn't feel like that's all of it. And so I feel at some point we're going to get a little bit more of his backstory and something more about his son and, the photo that we saw that he lost a couple episodes back. I mean, he's mentions a little bit that he had to, like he sacrificed his family and things like that, but we don't have a ton of detail. And I feel like there's got to be more to whatever's going on. And it does feel like he's not making anybody a fan of him, and he's alienating people that in the past have been supportive of him, including Giles. And so I understand Kyle's motivation for doing things, which is, he's worried about his family. He's trying to figure out a mystery about what happened to him and what happened to his mother. Like Kyle's motivations absolutely make sense to me. I don't understand where the Reverend is at.
Yeah, he does. I don't know. Like I think in a way he's consistent. Certainly, even through the end of the season, on just going off half cocked and shooting from the hip and not really being that smart about his actions.
But to me, it's also like he understands now, and it's a tough realization for him to come to, that he actually has no power over helping the possessed or stopping the possession from happening. I mean, we know that the reverend is, I mean, there's a reason why Sidney came after him, so we don't know for sure if he's actually been more effective than we know at this point, but at least from the reverend's perspective, he's been absolutely ineffective. He's now alienated his flock, like his followers and all of that, and he's super jealous of what Kyle can do, even though I think he views it as being necessary. So there's, I don't know, there's just something with him that I'm just not sitting well, to me it feels like there's a big old twist coming up at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe not this season, but maybe next season.
Yeah. So, well, we have another scene also with Patricia and her son. Her son is
Evil.
the epitome of terrible.
Yeah.
And she meets him with pure love, even though he calls her the town slut and is just really nasty to her. She's just like, I just want you to be happy. Can't you want the same for me, etc. And it's very endearing. Her character doesn't seem to put a foot wrong, you
Right.
know. And definitely I guess we were off base with thinking that she was going to be yet another bad, possessed person manipulating the Reverend, and actually she seems so far still to have been just a legit person.
She seems legit, but I still think, especially based upon what we figure out later on this episode, I still think, for me at least, the jury is out on that. There could be more there that we don't know about. I think her son's actions are totally crazy, but also in line with being a super punk dick kid. And he's playing with fire that he doesn't know about, which, to me, it's sort of like he wants chaos. He's the one that he admits to doing the graffiti on the statue during the Founders Day. Or not Founders Day, whatever it was, Remembrance Day.
Remembrance Day. He tells Sydney later, after those two get together, he's like, yeah, if you're burning down this town or tearing this town apart,
I
count
want
me
to be
in.
part of it.
Very strange.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. So again, clearly there's other stuff there. So I feel like there may be more going on than we know there. Because again, his motivations are a little bit mysterious to me. I mean, I guess you could just have somebody be a dick. Like, I guess that's totally true. But he seems so like to seek out Sidney in the way that he's doing and to band with this weird dude. Because Sidney is not exactly like, to me. I mean, look, this kid watched him carve up the Reverend. So to go and to put yourself into that person's power seems very strange to me.
Yeah.
I don't know that you'd necessarily want to cozy up and be like eating cereal at his house, which is kind of what he ends up doing. Just to me, that feels very strange. I don't know that you would be welcoming that interaction when you watched him do that to somebody.
Right.
And then more of what we learn makes it even more of what we learn in this episode. Not that punk kid knows that. What is his name again? Sorry.
Aaron.
Not that Aaron knows this stuff. Like, it's more like for us to know about Sidney that we find out. But we see a lot of pretty graphic scenes, or at least implied graphic scenes, with Sidney and this little boy that he basically met at the carnival or at the video center or whatever it is. I mean, we're talking like he's got the kid tied up. He's clearly been abused and like it's horrible. And then he like brings in a popsicle for the kid to eat as like a good thing. Like it's really, really disturbing to watch. I was having a hard time with it. I don't know about you, but it was really difficult to watch. So we know, the audience knows all this stuff. But I would say that Sidney gives off the vibes of being super creepy despite this. And, we don't know, as we are seeing these flashbacks with Sidney, we don't know whether this is the same Sidney that we're seeing that's possessed or not, and that's revealed later on. But even so, to me, it's chilling and weird. And I mean, I feel like Aaron's a character kind of thrown in there as a temptation almost. For him.
For sure. And we definitely get
and we see that
while
later.
he's in Sydney's double, Norgrove's old double wide where Sidney is living now. He has one of those flashbacks, and he kind of like clenches his fist and has to bear
Right.
through some sort of
Right.
temptation for sure.
Which leads to the next, to sort of the big reveal in this is that all along Kyle and the Reverend, or mostly the Reverend, but Kyle too, I guess, has been under the assumption that whatever is possessing these people, whatever the black stuff is that's coming out of their mouths, is evil, is a demon, whatever sort of biblical definition you want to put on it. The idea has been possession or whatever it's taking over spirit is bad and getting it out is good. And Sidney definitely puts that into question because he says certain things like, and also that we find out more from the fire chief as well, Fire Chief Ogden, that basically when people are possessed like this, they go through a transition period that is really difficult. And that's what the purpose of the weird cabin in the woods was. And also that the fire chief knows that Kat is possessed and is comfortable with that, and in fact likes her better than his wife in her original state, which is sort of creepy.
No, that's definitely bad. She, he's cheating on his wife with his possessed wife. Ultimately, I
Right.
mean,
No, but
you
he
know,
seems to be into it. Like he's really upset about the potential, the potential exorcism of his wife, which the Reverend kind of goes all out. And why would she get in the car with him is a question.
yeah, it's dumb. It's awkward, and but she's a demon. Like she shouldn't be that worried about feeling that pressure. She should just say no because she knows better. But for the story, for the sake of the story, it's fine. Whatever. She gets in the car, and then he does something very expected and drives her over to Kyle's house without checking with Kyle to see if he's even there. So
Right.
then he just has to wrestle her into the house. It's a pretty messed up scene. And of course, Aaron watches it all from Sydney's house, and then
Right.
goes and narcs on him to Giles, and not only says, "Hey, I was there and I saw the Reverend carve that pentagram onto his own chest because he's a crappy little man with a crappy little church, and he just wants people to talk about him." But he also says, "Yeah, now he's raping somebody out of Kyle Barnes's house," which is what
Yeah.
kind of brings a lot of characters together for that scene. And the scene of Kat and the Reverend and Kyle is also very interesting. Of the
Right.
this, I'm jumping ahead. First, you had Kyle talking to Sydney, and Sydney acknowledging that if Kyle were to draw out the demon, he would be releasing the serial killer to do his work again.
Yeah, so
So
he's
that
basically
that
saying like I actually made this person better, and he kind of puts a lot of shades of gray into this, and whether he's lying or not, we don't know. But this is what I was sort of hinting at before, is that it doesn't serve Sydney or whatever's in Sydney well to be a serial killer, because then he's drawing other attention to himself. He's not going to be undercover and able to help these other possessed demon people do whatever the heck the merge is.
Yeah, you can say that, but that didn't stop him from killing Norgrove. He just made it look like a suicide.
I guess that's true. So, so there may be things there that we don't know about, but ultimately Sydney, the possessed Sydney, released the boy that serial killer Sydney had locked up, and puts doubt into Kyle's mind about all of this, enough so that when he goes out to the house and and Giles and Chief Ogden and Kyle are all talking about it, and they're like, okay, or no, sorry, Giles and Chief Ogden are talking about the fact that he loves his possessed wife. I love my possessed wife. They all go out to the house, and Kyle's just like, he definitely has some doubt because he encourages the Reverend to release her. And one of the things that Sydney says to Kyle is that once whatever these things are in the body long enough, when they're taken out, they cause so much damage, and they pull out part of whatever the other person is, which is what happened to his mother, and supposedly this is why she is in the state that she is in. It
Catatonic.
was,
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's what happened to the girl in Louis, whatever city they went to. That's what happened to the
right.
girl in the city too. So and we
So we're
know
seeing
now that Kat has been possessed for like
a
18
long time.
months. The summer before last, so I
So
assume it's
basically,
winter.
she'll be left as a vegetable. And so we're getting a lot more behind the rules of this universe, or at least from what Sydney is sharing. We don't know, but you don't know whether to trust him as a narrator. He's not trustworthy.
Of
So
course, yeah.
we'll
Yeah,
see.
so it's just really puzzling. Like Kyle suddenly is like nobody's gonna hurt you, nobody's gonna do anything to you, because I guess he realizes that I don't know how he could know how long Kat's been possessed, but he is not gonna tempt fate and try and pull the
Right.
demon out of her. And so he tries to just escort her out of his house, and the Reverend then attacks him, and then they're having a fight, and then Giles and Chief show up, and it everybody splits up, and it's really bad and awkward.
Right.
And when you end up, that's the end of the. Is that the end of that episode? Basically, I think it is.
Yeah, pretty much. And just and the Reverend's still like, you don't. He's like, you don't understand what you're doing here because you're believing him, and he basically says that this is misdirection, and that Kyle is playing right into the hands of this. So the
Yeah.
hands of the
The
demons.
Reverend has been saying this to a lot of people. Like he tells Giles,
Yeah.
Why did you arrest him? You're playing right into his hands. He's martyrdom 101." And
Yep.
he's saying the same thing to Kyle. But really, the Reverend is the one who keeps playing into people's hands.
He really doesn't.
Uh,
He knows he's doing it, which is really
it's
strange.
kind of dumb, yeah. And he does it in the next episode. There's a bad example of that. But this episode, we still have he gets home to the Reverend house, and the people from the deacons are there, and they tell him he's fired,
Yep.
and that he has to move out right away. I think he has to move out like that night, which is
Yeah, he
really
does.
messed up. So he ends up at Patricia's house, and Kyle actually tells Megan about hitting why he hit Allison and the demon
Yep.
possession,
Yep.
which is pretty big deal. And
Not clear if
I
she
think,
believes him, but but
yeah,
but at least she does seem like, oh, now it makes sense, which is
this
weird.
there's a really sweet scene with Kyle's family and Megan's family eating dinner, and Holly says grace
Yeah,
because Debussy at school says grace at lunchtime, and
I
then they
know.
have a fun joke about how there's a kid named Debussy in her school. It was a really sweet scene, and
Yep.
like Mark has come home after they had a rough morning scene together. Megan and Mark. Mark's come home and been like, "I sold my truck, and here's the cash, so you can go back and get your wedding ring back from the pawn shop." Because he says some really really endearing things about how he can take my job, he can take my truck, but he's not going to take your wedding ring or something along those lines.
Right, and you see them more as a united force here instead of kind of doing things and fighting against each other. You see them more as a team here.
Yeah,
And I'll say things later about this as
yeah,
we
I
progress.
know, I know. It's all building up to great things.
Like, how on Walking Dead, when you start really liking a character or see
Because yeah, they start
really
talking
good things
sense.
about a character, that is what is going on here. And that's
It is.
immediately when the scene happened, I was like, oh, this does not bode well.
No,
So
you don't know
anyway,
that. Okay, but yeah. So that's the end of that episode, more or less, and we start with close to home. This is probably the best episode of this whole season.
agreed.
Yeah.
It really
Uh,
upset me though. I don't know about you, but this caused me some problems. I chose to watch it
yeah.
at night before I was going to bed, and
Yep, me too.
admittedly did not get much sleep after watching
Oh,
it.
I think I slept fine, but I was still just like, what? I had
Well,
to
you're
watch
you're
a
just
palate
harder than
cleanser.
me, my friend.
You just have to watch like How I Met Your Mother episode or something after that. But yeah, it's pretty hardcore. It starts out with Megan not showing great signs of being okay, more broken glass, cutting herself with it, and having the vision she has is really confusing to me of like Donnie grunting,
Yeah.
like she's having sex with adult Donnie.
Yeah, that was weird. Also, she's very sick. We're seeing actually a lot of the same signs that we saw with I'm forgetting his name, the character actor who's in prison now.
Yeah,
But we're seeing a lot of the same thing, like he not feeling well and showing some physical stuff that we've seen with people that I was already like, oh no, this is not going to be good.
yeah.
But again, it's one of those things where she's been through such trauma. the reappearance of Donnie, all the stuff going on between her and Mark, and her confronting some of the stuff that happened when she was a kid with Donnie, her sexual abuse and all that. Is it that, or is it like they definitely make you walk the line whether to question what's actually going on with her?
Yep.
But they do a pretty good job with it.
Yep. So then Kyle shows up at her house and tries to, get her to snap out of whatever funk she's in, and then asks her for help getting his daughter into her school, which I think is maybe the first time I've understood that she has a job. I didn't even think she was employed, and then turns out she works at a school. She might be a teacher even, and they. Yeah. So, and then we also have a scene with Patricia and the Reverend, whose house he is now at. And she says, "Move in with me." And he's also talking about how his son was a fighter. And he talks about him only in the past tense.
Yep.
So, yeah, then they go to school, Amber, Kyle, and Megan, and things seem nice. They have Kyle and Amber Kyle just seems like a good dad. Like he gets, he's making promises that seem attainable. And doesn't seem to hold back in his agenda from her, which is good.
Right. And he's also, he's still looking for Allison, trying to figure out what happened to her. So he does try to go back to the house, and like there's this weird scene where he thinks he sees her and it's not her. But part of this is that, and again, this is one of those like pieces where I'm like, oh no, he convinces Mark to go buy the house with him.
Yeah, this is another great scene for Mark. I mean, again, with the character development of this guy, it's wonderful. He has some great scenes.
Right, and I mean, him and Kyle, and especially the stuff that Mark's just been through, they come to an understanding that you haven't seen there before. And they say a lot of things between each other that basically makes the peace between them. And immediately I was like, this is just going to end horribly.
Yeah.
But I did love the scene between them at the house. And Mark is offering support to Kyle and also apologizes for his behavior. And Kyle's like, look, we're both protecting our families. And Mark says the same thing. And it's actually a really great bit of dialogue and relationship building between these two.
No, it's awesome.
But in this whole section, Kyle sees what kind of put Allison over the deep end. He sees the drawing in the back of Amber's closet as he's collecting clothes, and then gets what happened with Allison. So
yeah, he finally figures it out.
Yeah.
We also have scenes of the Reverend figuring out trying to figure out how he can get his job back, which goes super well.
He's really good about doing that. See, this is the Reverend to me seems like the most, I don't know what they're doing with him, but the stuff that they're doing with him doesn't make sense to me.
Like I said, I think he comes up with a plan, and then he's kind of dumb, and he'll just start punching people, or he has bad execution of plans that might be okay originally.
Which is interesting because it's like, he talks about his son, he talks about him in the past tense, he talks about how he's a fighter, and then we see all these tendencies from the Reverend, which leads me to believe that perhaps this is impulse control issues that were maybe hereditary. And maybe his son was seeing some of the stuff going on with his dad, and maybe there's a lot more to that story than we know. Which might be revealed later. But yeah, look, he's like, oh, I'm going to go in and get my job back, and then he falls right into Sydney's trap once again. And basically beats the tar out of Sidney in front of all the church members, because that's going to really make them want to give him his job back. So
yeah, although there's some other scenes interwoven here too, but we also had the cat and the fire chief trying to leave town, and Sidney intervenes and is like, hey, where are you going? I got stuff for you to do. So that's another element to this episode, is like not letting them leave town.
Well, it is, but it's interesting because she definitely acts as if she's been caught, So obviously whatever these things are held accountable to whatever Sidney is. So there must be some sort of a hierarchy there. And she definitely, she tries to fight a little bit, but ultimately takes whatever he's offering, because I think she doesn't really have much of a choice. So he's basically like, I have this role I want you to play, and that's that. Um, Now, do we want to talk about the big piece of the show that we've been dancing around?
Oh well, Kat and the fire chief. It turns out their new job is down in a like a deserted clothing store, and she's like, "This is perfect." We don't really know what it's about. The fire chief seems to be getting cold feet, and Kat says to him, "Like, there's no you and me without this job." So she's kind of using his affection for her to keep him their errand boy, essentially. Megan, it turns out, has been really sick and puked in front of the whole school, and so that's why Mark leaves Kyle at Allison's house to go back to see how she's doing, which is when Kyle then runs into Allison's mom and gets the address for where she's been holed up. Although it looks really bad when she finds him there, and there's like broken glass, and Mark's not there
Right.
to smooth
Back him
things
up.
over, but they make it work.
But
So
then
he
it
ends up going to the loony bin to talk to her.
But this is the thing, is that I think it says a lot that her mom was willing to tell him that's where she was. And he was able to convince her that his intentions were good and that maybe she didn't understand everything going on. And, think about it. If you're from a parent's perspective and you think this has happened to your child, no matter how old they are, it must say a lot that she believed him. So, yeah.
Well, she
And
did. I mean, she knew that Allison had left Amber with him the night
right.
before, so she was. I don't know. Some of this is just annoying, where she's like, I know she's not afraid of you anymore. Now she's afraid of herself, and I blame you for that." It's like, oh,
Right.
come on, give me a break.
Well, people like to blame a lot of other people for stuff that they don't
And
have any control over.
yeah, of this episode, I guess the scene at the loony bin is probably my least favorite because I
Yeah, it
don't
was
understand
annoying.
Allison's. I don't understand her where she's coming from. I mean, yeah, it's one thing if she doesn't believe Kyle's kind of insane explanation of, "Oh, don't worry, you were possessed and
You're
you're not."
okay now.
I could get that, but then there's like a little bit too much crying for me to watch it comfortably.
No, and
Honestly,
also she's super drugged up too, so there's also that weird thing going on because she's not really reacting to. She's a little bit flat.
it's
Just
just
be
yeah, and then yeah, her thing is like, I just yeah, he explains that she was possessed and that she's not anymore and everything's fine, and she just says, "You have to be the one to raise our child now, not me, not us," and then that's it, right?
Yeah, and
I
that's
can't
it.
protect her from myself or something. Or I can't
Right.
protect myself from myself, maybe. It's
Well,
suggesting that
but
she's still going to try and kill herself or something.
well, maybe, but also maybe she's worried. I mean, this is the thing: is that as Kyle says, people around him are vulnerable to this, so maybe she's afraid it's going to happen again. And maybe it isn't as maybe the exorcism that we've been seeing Kyle doing. Maybe it's not as foolproof as we think. So who knows? But in any case, she doesn't feel like she wants to endanger her child, which I guess I can understand. Like, cause look, she's got very choppy memories of it. She just remembers putting her child in danger. So
Hmm.
I understand that. But you know, that's I think we'll see more with her later, perhaps.
Yeah, but so based on his trip to this hospital, he's left Amber with Megan for most of the day. She's there hanging out with Holly and Mark, and they're all gonna have a slumber party potentially. But he's like, no, I want Amber to be under my roof tonight, and I'm coming home for her. But first he stops and gets some of her stuff, and then sets it up back at his house. And the Reverend comes over, and they're having a conversation, and then we have the shower scene, and not in a good way.
Nope. So first we have this scene between Megan and Mark, and she reveals she's pregnant. And at first it's like a bad thing, and then she seems really happy about it, and they seem really happy, and
Well,
you
because
know,
Mark turns that around
yep,
because he's like, look, it's okay. This is a sign. I've got a job interview tomorrow. Everything's gonna be great. And you're like,
right.
awesome.
Everything's happy in rainbows. And then there's the shower.
So then, yeah, Megan gets possessed,
Yep.
and I guess we've been able to write off all of her bizarre behavior and throwing up and stuff to maybe morning sickness. I don't know about
And
cutting
being
yourself with
upset about the
glass.
trauma of this stuff, and All sorts of stuff. Um,
But then she gets possessed and comes out of the shower and is having the weird vision that we get to see from a demon from Demon Cam.
right. And she also screams,
Yeah,
which
which
brings
is what
Mark
triggers
running.
Mark. So long story short, Mark's dead.
It's a pretty horrific scene though too. Like I mean, they really play this out. Like she takes glass, she shoves it in him,
I
pulls
think
out the
actually
glass, lets the
she just
blood
bashes
pool.
his head into the mirror and he somehow gets glass in his neck from that. It's not that
Yes.
she
Oh,
doesn't
that's true.
actually go to stab him, but
Admittedly, I
then
was having trouble watching the scene, so
yeah, yeah,
my
yeah.
memory may be a little traumatic, like glossing over things in the trauma. But I do remember the piece where she's just like kind of looking at him and plucks that glass out, so he just pretty much bleeds out quickly.
Yep, that's basically what does him in. I don't know that he would have lived either way, but taking
Probably
the
not.
glass out leads to arterial bleeding, and he's dead within seconds.
Yep. Um.
And then she
Yeah.
plays with his blood for a while until she
And
hears something crash downstairs.
also his eye. Eesh.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. It's really upsetting. She's like sticking her fingers in his dead cold eyes. It's really, really awful.
Out there
Um,
cold yet? Only been dead for like half a minute.
uh,
But yeah, messed up. So now we've got two kids, two little girls, including Kyle's daughter, and they are in the house with a freshly turned Megan demon, and who's covered in blood and bare ass naked. Wow.
and luckily, Amber knows what's what here. She's like, Holly, we gotta run.
Well, we don't know. We haven't seen any of this yet.
Oh, that's
So
right.
that's the next episode. But what we do get is Kyle's phone rings where he's talking to the Reverend on his porch.
Right.
And this is the same day that they've had a punch out fight, right?
Yep.
So it's nice that they're able to just kind of bounce back from that and have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and she's like, Mommy, Aunt Megan, she's sick like, or Daddy,
Like mommy.
yeah,
Yep.
she's sick like,
Sorry, I jumped into the next one because it was so traumatizing.
yeah. Yeah. So that, as you said, it's an amazing ending. And it could have been, it could have ended the season there. It's a bit of a cliffhanger, which would have been hard to handle.
It
They
might have
kind of
been, but
leave
I
it.
feel like this was would have been such an not even a nice, but such an excellent wrap up, and it was this to me. It was the strongest episode of the entire season,
Yeah.
and to me that should be the finale. But that's
Well,
not where
I
they ended
was, you know,
it.
my
So
instant gratification, me want like the fact that they tied up some of those ends. You get to, we get to find out what happens to Amber in the next episode.
see, I
I would
like
have
it
had a
and I
hard time.
don't. I like it and I don't. Part of why I don't like it is because I feel like this show is gonna like I know they've renewed it and I'm happy about that, but I feel like this show could get a lot more viewers if they had ended it there. But you're right, it is nice to know what happens to everybody, so we can jump into the next one and talk about that, I guess.
Yeah, we also should also just quickly mention that the Reverend makes another mistake with Patricia and gets kicked out of her house this episode in that
Yeah,
episode
because he
because
thinks beating her kid is gonna work
he
for him.
threatens to beat her kid, who deserves to be beaten,
He does,
probably.
but you can't really
But
do that stuff in front of moms. That's just a terrible
no,
thing.
and Aaron plays the situation, and the Reverend's like, he's playing you, and yes, he is, but still, you're
And you got played from him by
yeah,
him, and you know better.
yeah. But the Reverend seems to get played and know better all the time.
Right.
So this the little light, is the final episode of the season. It starts with kind of back in the bathroom with Megan. She's playing with blood.
Right, and because of the title of this episode, I figured there would have to be something about Amber in this,
Well, yeah,
since
and
that's what Allison's parting words to Kyle were when she left like the little note that
yep.
she left to Kyle said, "Take care of our little light." So
And
I was like, "All right."
it's also been night scenes ever since Kyle got to the mental hospital, and we're still at night. And basically, we're going to be at night until the end of this episode, which is
Right.
it's really hard for me to handle, especially when you're watching it on an airplane and it's really dark.
Ah,
So yeah, the girls are doing their slumber party stuff. They're sneaking some extra dessert out of the fridge. It's cute, it's endearing, but we're like, oh, what are you doing? Don't go upstairs. They
yep.
run into Megan standing there bleeding, or not bleeding, but with covered in blood, and they see Mark behind her on the floor in the bathroom. And Amber, this is where Amber's like, let's go, and she starts pulling on Holly like, we have to run. She knows
Now.
right away. She knows right away
Mm-hmm.
that this what's happening here. So then they run.
Right, and I mean, you can't blame Holly for being a little shell shocked. She's seen her dad on the floor. Her mom's hand is
It's,
covered in blood. Like it's
it's
scary.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, good moving, Amber. Good moving. Get going.
Yeah, and their screams kind of freak out Megan too. So she doesn't like loud noises. It becomes apparent. Suddenly, the next thing we know, Kyle and the Reverend have arrived, and they're running around the house. And the thing that bothered me in this scene is that they didn't turn any lights on. They decided just to do it all in the dark.
And they see Mark's body, which is horrible. And then they go upstairs and they definitely have that whole they're building the suspense because you see like blood all over the wall of the or the door of the closet. And I mean, the last cutaway that we saw was that, like, it's a classic horror movie trick where the kid, like, you're kind of seeing it from the kid's viewpoint where they're looking through the slats of the closet and you're just seeing her kind of wandering around all weird. And then we see it from her perspective and she's doing the demon vision where things are kind of like flashing and strange looking.
Oh, right.
And she opens the closet though. Or it seems like she does.
Seemed like she did. Yeah, but if they scream and she is freaked out by that, that could have been how it went down. We don't really get to see exactly how it went down.
We don't. But in any case, the kids are okay. So in case you were worried, that's
Yeah.
the deal.
That was a legit concern. But Megan is in the wind. She's not there in the house anymore.
Nope.
So that's a problem. Yeah. And this is like, I feel like this plays out in kind of a believable way. Kyle and the Reverend just take the girls out of the house and they're like, oh, what are we going to do? But they go to Giles's house, which makes
Right.
sense.
Well, it does make sense because they don't know what to do. I mean, Megan's out there somewhere. Mark's dead. And they've got to stash the girls somewhere. And I don't think they fully expected this to happen. But basically, Chief Giles' wife is just like, all right, I'm going to watch these kids. I don't know what's going on, but let's
Yeah.
get these kids inside. She was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was a nice moment. And meanwhile, Megan is standing in the middle of a football field when the sprinklers come on, and then she freaks out and runs into a chain link fence a couple times.
So, okay, so we know that light, loud noises, and is it the water or is it the surprise of the water?
I think it's just the surprise of things happening. She's like not ready for
because
anything.
she's like kind of running around like a chicken with her head cut off. Like she
Yeah.
just runs straight into that fence. It's like she doesn't know how to negotiate the world. And we've seen this with newly possessed people in the past. I mean, we even saw it in Sidney's flashbacks where he's trying to kind of figure out how to open a door. When, he
Right,
opened
he
the door
breaks
to the...
down a door. That's funny.
Yeah.
Also, Megan has put on a shirt, which is good, probably for the actress. But it's a little
Yep.
weird. Like, why would the demon be like, "Oh, I should put on a shirt"?
Yep, that was kind of strange. But the shirt, serves a purpose because it's kind of blood strewn and makes her look even crazier than she is.
Yeah.
I also thought it was a little bit of a, like, I thought it was a bit symbolic because it's white. And, you see these acolytes and things like that if you're talking about religious experience and things like that. And often, with baptisms and things like that, they're often wearing white like this, but it's definitely a very dirtied white. So I thought it was a bit deliberate to make her look this way.
Kyle asks Giles to cover up a homicide. They're like, "You can't tell." You can't call this in as a homicide. It's got to be an accident.
I do like Giles' reaction, though. What am I supposed to do? Nobody,
Yeah.
the court's not going to believe this.
No, nobody's going to believe this. I find this is a challenging thing to ask. Sidney finds Aaron broken into his house once again. And I'm really hoping that Sidney just kills Aaron at this point.
Oh, I thought he was going to do something pretty bad to him here.
Yeah. Aaron has no fear of him and just is giving him shit about not being able to chase Anderson out of town.
Right.
Which seems like anytime Aaron is interacting with Sidney, you're like, "Oh, you're doing things wrong. You shouldn't be doing this."
But not yet.
But yeah, so far no big deal. Yeah, and it seems like Mrs. Fire has Megan or someone who has taken out her eyes. You're not really able to see Mrs. Fire. That's what I call Kat. Sorry, in my notes, I'm just like, I can never remember her name, so I call her Mrs. Fire.
Mrs.
and
Fire.
Mr. Fire.
That's nice. This is
But
a little bit of a bait and switch. They're making you think that it's Megan,
Yeah,
and it's not.
right. You're not sure.
Because then it flashes to Megan eating some
Eating trash floor.
trash floor. and then almost getting, it seems like she might be getting it on with the teenage kid who seems like he's like, yeah, you look
Hey,
crazy, but you're
okay,
kind
yeah,
of
let's
hot.
do this. You're like a trash eating person wearing a t-shirt in the middle of the night. I think this could work between us.
I know.
But
But then
then
she
the
gets
headline,
scared away.
it's yeah, she gets scared of a car and runs away. And was that Kyle's car? Maybe because that's the next scene we get. Like, there's a lot of really good cuts here. So they have a police scanner now that Giles has given them, and they're just driving around waiting to hear about a woman in a t-shirt or a crazy woman in the streets. And it's funny because apparently there's two crazy women in the streets of Rome that night,
Right.
which was funny.
Um, and so they think what's Megan, and it's like, oh, it's not Megan. It's like, oh, sorry, wrong person.
And during this car trip, they actually have a very important conversation too about the timing of when they can do exorcisms. Kyle is basically laying it out for the Reverend, like, oh yeah, so for people like my mom and that other chick in the city, they have been in there too long, and so it didn't work. But there's a transition period when we can still pull it out. And so they're
Right.
establishing this between the two of them, and now for us.
Right.
Uh,
And it's also why they're so, why Kyle is so desperate and motivated to find Megan quickly.
yeah, but I mean, how
So
long had Josh, the first kid, been possessed? Probably days,
it felt like days,
right?
right?
Sure did. Because they came back a couple times to until they before they actually did the effective exorcism.
Right. And also the handyman, like maybe the reason why the handyman felt like it was such a loss was because, I mean, I don't know how long the timeline was, but it
No,
felt like he was locked up in that room like at least a couple of days.
that was very unclear. Yeah.
So, there's that too. Um,
So they also go through some stuff once they go to the scene of the other woman who's just drunk or high or whatever, and the cops are taking her in. We have Giles calling a cleaner to clean up the the crime scene, and Kyle and the Reverend get really logical. They're like, what do they want? And here we finally hear the Reverend using some of his experience of talking to probably dozens and dozens of zombies, of demon possessed people, and he's like, they don't like light, they don't like sound, they want to be somewhere that's familiar. It's like they're looking for someone to take care of them.
like a parent
Yeah, and so they
or
they have that
comfort.
realization and drive very quickly off to Kyle's house.
But it's interesting what the Reverend says because it's not, they're looking for somebody to take care of them. Is it the demon or is it the person that's being possessed and looking for that comfort? Because they tend to go to whatever gave them comfort as a human,
Yeah, true.
which is what leads them to Kyle's house.
Yeah, which is apparently where she's been, but she's already been taken away.
By Sidney. And Sidney's very gentle with her. He seems very excited about the fact that she's possessed, and he basically is, it's a little bit like a demon birthday. He's like, welcome to the world, demon spawn.
Yeah, and how does he find out that Amber has been taken to the sheriff's house? Do we ever figure that one out?
Yes, because Chief Giles' wife talks to Kat and
Talks to
asks her
Cat.
what's going on.
Yeah.
And so that's how they know. And so basically Sidney tasks Aaron with, I'm not sure that I would, but he tasks Aaron with stealing Amber, which is really creepy and strange.
Yeah, so that little twerp breaks into the sheriff's house, and the Mrs. Sheriff apparently can't stop him from taking a child. I find this is another slight problem I have with this episode. Why would that woman have allowed this little skinny teenager to take a girl out of her house? How do they
Right.
not
It
have
doesn't
guns in
seem
her
like,
house?
well, not even guns, but she seems pretty badass too.
Yeah, she's fit,
So
I guess. She
she
could
seems
just
pretty fit. She could just smash a lamp over his head if she doesn't have a gun. But you're right. He's a chief of police. I can't imagine the woman doesn't know how to handle a gun.
one would think.
Anyway.
But yeah, that's upsetting. And there doesn't seem to be enough panic when this information is being relayed later.
Especially to the Reverend, but it's not clear to me whether the Reverend is trying to keep his reaction steady so as not to freak Kyle out. But it turns out he doesn't even need to because when they're at Kyle's house, Kyle finds a note with a weird little statue, the a la whatever her name was, and basically knows that they have Amber. And is like, okay, we need to go and do this. And Kyle actually seems pretty calm, but more like, we need to go get my kid now.
Yeah. But they
And I
also
don't.
also has the speech now with the Reverend, like, I'm going to do this by myself. I don't need you, which I didn't really think made sense either.
Well, I mean, I get the sense that he doesn't trust the Reverend completely, and now that it's his
Good.
daughter, he's worried that the Reverend's going to be focusing more on Sidney than on getting his daughter back. And that's kind of what the Reverend says is like, your family doesn't matter. It just matters that the devil doesn't take possession of the earth for 1,000 years. And whatever he's basing this on, I don't know. And Kyle doesn't know. But
Yeah.
Kyle's just like, okay, well, yeah, this is all important, but I'm getting my family. I'm getting my kid.
Yeah. So Kyle puts his faith in Sydney somehow, meets him at some kind of drop site, and gets into the back of his car uh, with a bag on his head, and then he ends up being reunited with Amber actually, which is
Yeah,
kind
in
of
the
surprising.
demonic nursery, whatever that place is.
In a demonic nursery, it's a good name for it. But so that's good, I guess. But he can't break that door down, and I'm like, why can't you break the door down? And he does get some information from Sydney here. He finds out that essentially he is from the same plane of existence as the demons.
Right.
Um,
And that's why they're all attracted and coming there, and there's a reason why they can't stay there. Though he's very cryptic about that.
they can't stay where they're from.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
not
they've been
clear.
doing this for a long time. Like, this is not new. It's just coming to light now, maybe because more of them are coming, maybe because there's a crisis on that plane, who knows? And yeah, so anyway, he locks Kyle and Amber up for future use, it seems.
He does actually say you're gonna stay here till we need you.
Yep.
Yeah, and then the Reverend shows up. I don't know how he got there. He
I
must
don't
have
either,
followed
but
somebody.
I'll admit to you when, so Sydney leaves Kyle all locked up and walks out of the demonic nursery. And I can tell you I have never been so happy to see the Reverend's crazy eyes in the in the car when he sees Sydney coming out, and I'm like, oh, thank God. However, what unfolds in these next few scenes in the demonic nursery drove me insane.
Oh, well, I really like the fact that the Reverend opens the trunk of his car, and on the left is his exorcism bag, on the right is a tire iron, and
And he chooses well.
he chooses the tire iron, which I had a chuckle over that.
I thought that was a very nice setup.
Yeah,
Agreed.
a little a little ham-fisted, but it was still good for a laugh.
Yeah, it was very funny.
And so inside the nursery, he shows up. Kat is like, "Oh, it's you," but she just seems like disappointed, and there's no like bum rush to get him out of there or knock him out or kill him. They just kind of let him do what he wants to do for a while.
Well, I mean, to me, this shows something that Kat is not scared of him at all. She's just like, oh, you showed up, you little pesky fly. You
Yeah,
meddling kids. She's not really concerned about the fact that he's there. She's very confident in whatever she's doing, and she's confident that he's not going to stop her.
yeah, it's very strange. We do also get confirmation that we see some scenes of Megan being in the demonic nursery too,
Yep.
along
So
with
she's there.
other people. As
Well,
the
we know
Reverend
she's there
talks
because we
to-
saw like Mrs. Fire and Chief Fire and Sydney taking her in the car.
Yeah, but
So
where she was going to end up, we weren't exactly sure. But
right.
it's so she's there too, and Reverend just calls out, "Hey, Kyle, are you here?" And Kyle's like, "Yeah, I'm here." And then he starts breaking open the door. So it's like it's kind of what I like about this setup is that it's simple. It's hey, you know what? Kyle gets in the car with Sydney and ends up with his daughter. It was kind of surprising, but hey, that's great. They just decided to keep them together for some reason, you know.
All right.
So
What bothered me about this particular scene is that so Kyle's been trying to find a way out of the room. And so he's been sort of breaking down the door. He's not really, he's just looking for ways to get out. We see him pick up a mattress, put it down for some reason. He's just kind of wandering around the room, getting the lay of the land. And then he hears when the Reverend yells, in earnest, tries to start breaking down that door. And the Reverend's trying to break him out, like with the tire iron.
hmm
And then he hears that the Reverend is being attacked, and then suddenly is like, oh, I'm going to stop here, take a pause, build my daughter a little fort. Like, he knows what could happen to the Reverend, and he just, to me, this makes no sense whatsoever.
why he takes more time? I think
Yeah,
he
I
wants
mean,
to
I
make
know
sure
he's
that
trying to protect his kid,
yeah.
but, there, to me, in the moment when he sees what's happening to the Reverend, that he's being overwhelmed by these
It was
people.
Lenny mostly, wasn't it? Wasn't it Mr.
Yeah.
Fire?
Mr. Fire, but then he hears Cat. I don't know. I just think that was kind of an odd decision to make, and it just makes it. I mean, I know that they're trying to prolong the drama, but it just seems stupid to me.
Well, what seemed it seemed to me like the show was trying to let us see was that the Reverend weakened the lock on the door, so
Yeah.
it was really teamwork, a
Yeah.
teamwork moment. So that by the Reverend having done that, Kyle was able to break out. But yeah, he
Yeah.
did take his time, I guess. But once they get out, they exercise one chick. I forget what happened to Lenny. Did he get beat up, knocked out?
I think he got knocked out.
Okay. They exercise one demon chick who shows up and tries to attack them. And while they're dealing with her, Megan scarily gets up and starts walking towards Amber. But Amber screams, and then they wait. Amber Megan is basically sucking the face out of Kyle and killing him. Somehow she
Well,
has
yeah, no,
overwhelmed him.
she gets interrupted looking for Amber because Amber and Kyle goes in to protect her and then
Yeah,
gets
yeah. But
into a
then Megan is
situation.
killing him.
Right. And I have to say, you know, Megan, the actress who plays Megan,
Something.
Ren something, but in any case, she does an amazing job, I thought, at playing a possessed scary person because I thought she was terrifying.
She shades of the ring with her hair all up in her face.
Yeah, no, I mean, she looks cool. Like her acting, like everything is really like excellent about the way she plays this. You really feel like she's a possessed person. You don't feel like you get one little glimmer of Megan, which you don't know because like Kyle's trying to get her to like kind of come away from Amber and get her to recognize him, and she's speaking to him not as Megan, and then she comes back for a minute, and then it's gone, and she's attacking him again.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty cool. And then we get the big reveal.
Right. Amber saves. Amber does the exorcism. Amber
Yep.
casts out the demons. That's fantastic, and it also backs up my theory that Allison was trying to suck Amber's face
Yep.
in the bedroom.
Which I thought was probably what was trying to happen, and I thought we were going to see more of like a flashback, but I guess they wanted to wait for the big reveal here. But yeah, I thought there was, to me, especially given how Sidney and the team are, I knew that they were looking for, I felt like they were looking for Amber for more than just the fact that she's Kyle's kid and they're trying to use her as collateral. So, and as leverage.
Right.
But this was like nice, like, and what I really liked is how Amber just did this in such a badass way. She just was like holding on both sides of her face. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It makes it look like she's actually done it before, which is a little disturbing because she's probably six. So
Which maybe she did have a hand in her mom's. You don't know.
maybe we never saw that scene. So we've Megan has been exorcised. There are still a few demons unaccounted for in the nursery. I don't know what happened to Kat. Maybe she ran away. Why aren't they now trying to lay hands on all the other people down there? Because there were at least three or four other demons down
Yeah,
there.
that seemed weird too, right?
So, but then we just kind of cut to the next scene, which is I'm not sure where it is. I forget, but Megan is kind of herself. She's conscious, and she asks where Mark is.
And that sucked. That
And
was pretty awful.
the Reverend has to leave the room. The Reverend leaves the room. And Kyle, to his credit, again, he's kind of a straight shooter. He's just like, look, he's dead. It was an
Yep.
accident. He's dead. And so she starts freaking out. And the Reverend then goes and does something really stupid again.
Yep.
What? Like they can't just let his character do one good thing and just leave it at that, because then he has to go and burn down Sydney's double wide.
And they imply that Sydney's in there. It's clearly not Sydney. I think it's either Aaron or it's Chief Fire. But it's clear to me it's clearly not Sydney in there.
Well, yeah.
So I don't know what he thinks he's doing. And then he has the awkward moment of running into Aaron's mother.
In the first daylight scene of the freaking episode, of the last two episodes almost,
Yeah.
he runs into his Aaron's mother, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, I was a jerk the other day," and she's kind of like over it in a way. She doesn't seem mad at him. But
No, and she's like, now Aaron's missing. And he's
yeah.
like, oh.
Whoops.
It's just really like,
He's the
rough
worst
scene.
at being a good guy, is what I have in my notes.
yes, he is the worst.
And then we have the final scene of the season, which is Kyle and Amber getting gas, and they're having a cute scene together, family, lovey-dovey, and then people are being weird. People are staring.
It
Amber-
felt like a very body snatcher kind of a scene, right?
Yeah.
Like we get, or like, I don't know, like from hell or something. Like basically there's townspeople who suddenly all take notice of them and look like they're gathering to do something.
Yeah.
And the assumption, I think, can be that all these are demon-possessed people.
Or that they're just normal people who are suddenly like noticing Kyle and Amber together. The whole weird thing about how they make people uncomfortable.
Yep,
The
maybe.
Blake character talked about several episodes ago.
Yep.
But yeah, Amber has a really funny line in this scene though too. Before the really creepy staring stuff happens, when Kyle is like, "Hey, it's like we've got superpowers," and she's like, "I'd rather be able to fly or be
Or be
invisible."
invisible.
So that was a good line.
And he's like, yeah, me too, kid.
Yeah, this is kind of shitty.
But I thought, like, I really loved the relationship building between Kyle and Amber in these
Good.
last couple of
She's a good little
episodes.
actress.
She's a good actress, but I just feel like oftentimes, they have this motivation of this adult character, and the kid, like they have. Usually, you'll see to me, a lot of the times you see these unrealistic and stupid relationships between adults and their kids, or parents and their kids, and I don't think they did that here. I think that they do have like really good. You believe that they're father and daughter, and you believe that there is like a loving relationship there and trust there. And I thought excellent job on the dialogue and in the acting between these two. But until next season, we will find out what happens to them. But I like that they're kind of like a father-daughter team exorcist.
Yeah, I
Team
mean,
exorcism.
if they stick with the same actor, child actor for Amber, I mean, as we've seen in any of these shows, you take 6 months between shooting one season and the next, and that kid's gonna look a lot older.
Yep.
Maybe not right away because she's a really little kid. But
Right.
yeah, a la Game of Thrones, they try to do more than 3 seasons of this show, and she's gonna be like a tween, and it's gonna change the dynamic a little bit. They might have to
Right.
change actors.
Part of me wants to read these comics,
Oh yeah,
so I may do that in between seasons. My series sort of review, there was definitely some things in this show that I don't like, and I don't like the characterization of the Reverend. I don't like where they're going with his character. I feel like they could be a little bit more nuanced with him. Overall, I have really enjoyed watching this season, and I'm excited to see the next one.
I guess that I would say I agree mostly, but I kind of enjoy the fact that the Reverend is consistently kind of
Crazy,
kind of bad at what he does. His heart's in the right
maybe.
place, but I think his heart's in the right place, but he almost always has poor execution. He's all thrust and no vector. Like he'll just
True.
go off and do something really stupid, but once in a while, when he's like chasing, following Sydney and going into a demon nursery with a tire iron, you're like, yeah, thank God for the Reverend and his poor choices.
Well, I mean, I kind of see what they're going with him, having not read the comics, but I think he's definitely one of those characters where he's supposed to be good and doing what he's doing for the force of good, but he's very flawed, and you could make the argument that he falls into temptation a lot more than somebody in his role should probably do and should probably know better.
Hmm.
But I like that aspect of him. I just wish they showed more motivation for why he's doing these things.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit more character building to show why he's doing these things. And again, I think they're probably waiting to reveal that till later on, and they'll probably do it in some weird flashback. I agree with you, and I liked how he was doing these things. I just would like to see a little bit more basis for why he's doing them.
Yeah,
That's all.
fair enough. But that's a lot of Outcasts we just had to plow through. So hopefully anybody stayed with us through all of that. But we're
Even
glad we
if they
watched it.
didn't, I'm glad we got to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I felt like I really enjoyed watching this show more than I have many shows this year. So I have to say I have definitely enjoyed watching it a lot more than Fear the Walking Dead. Taking a step back, we'll see how the second half of season 2 goes, which starts tonight, I think. So we'll see.
As we've mentioned.
As we mentioned 3 times, with and without coffee.
So yeah, I guess what are we gonna do next?
Well,
Are we
do you
gonna do
want to
Fear?
do Fear the Walking Dead?
Let's do it, man. Let's get back on the wagon.
All right, on the boat, so to speak, or
Who knows? Who
in
knows what we're gonna
Mexico.
be on. Yeah, walking down a dusty Mexican highway. So yeah, join us again next time on Reanimated for episode 113, when we will be talking about Fear the Walking Dead, probably one episode at a time, I guess.
Probably, because that's how we
Unless
roll. But
unless
sometimes
some
it's 2
breaks.
episodes at a
Yeah,
time because we
yeah,
are terrible. So there we go.
exactly, exactly.
If
All
you
right.
feel like weighing in on Outcast or, talking about how much you disagree with me about Fear the Walking Dead, feel free to send us a tweet at reanimatedpcast. And you can also check out the website, reanimatedpodcast.com, or you can send us an email at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. Correct?
Wunderbar.
Awesome. But until next time, don't watch episode 9 of Outcast before you go to bed.
Yeah. Watch it in a brightly lit room.
Agreed.
Okay.
All right. Have a
All
good
right,
one,
good
everyone.
stuff. Bye.
Bye.